Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's edition of the Client Enrichment Series, GSA's Water Quality Management Program Update. My name is Eric Fulton, and I am the Client Relationship Manager in the Public Building Service Office of Client Strategy. But more importantly, I am your host for today's presentation. Before we begin, I do want to share a few housekeeping instructions so that we can have a great presentation. We have automatically muted your audio to help control the sound quality of the presentation. If you do want to send us a note, there's two ways to do that. There is a chat pod as well as a Q&A area. If you are having a technical problem, if you did not receive if you have a question about the program, you're having audio difficulties, you can get in touch with a member of the Client Enrichment Series staff in the chat pod, and we will do our best to resolve your situation. We do welcome subject matter questions from you today. We have several subject matter experts with us. We are going to be taking advantage of their expertise. But if you have questions about GSA's Water Quality Management Program, please use the Q&A pod for that. That will allow us to curate the questions, to make sure the right people respond to them. And most importantly, we export all of the questions that are asked, including those we don't have a chance to get to during the presentation. And what we do is we turn that around into an FAQ and resources document so that you have a register of all of the links, of all of the information, all of the questions, and all of the appropriate responses. But we can only do that if you submit your subject matter questions into the Q&A pod. Both the chat and the Q&A pod should be available, buttons for you to hit at the bottom of your screen. Also, I'll add, if you happen to not follow that directive, a member of the Client Enrichment Series staff will very politely slap you on the wrist and redirect you to the Q&A pod. So thank you very much. We want to make sure we take the most advantage of our subject matter experts that we have with us today. I did note that that resources doc will be available to persons after the program. We link to our website, www.gsa.gov/CES. That's where we keep links to all of about a year's worth of archived presentations, videos, and those Q&A documents. Okay, so today we are providing an update on the status and the future of GSA's Water Quality Management Program. And we have several highly qualified subject matter experts with us today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce them. We will first hear from Courtney Hatchell. If you have been with us for previous programs, Courtney name may be familiar to you. She is the former Water Quality Management Program Manager and now serves as the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the PBS Office of Facilities Management's Centrally Aligned Programs and Services Department. She has been responsible for the day-to-day management of the Water Quality Management Program here at GSA, the program and the testing initiative, that is, since 2023, and now is transitioned to a nationally dispersed team of industrial hygienists on her team. She has spent the entirety of her career serving in multiple facilities management positions across the country. And we have three of those industrial hygienist team members with us today. They include Matt Emery. Matt has 16 years of industrial hygiene and environmental science experience in both the federal and private sectors. He currently supports an area which includes facilities in Texas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. We have Patricia Salcido Lomelli with us, CIH-CSP, that's Certified Industrial Hygienist and Certified Safety Professional. She has 16 years of experience in the federal sector. Formerly, she was with VHA, where she was a key player in developing the VHA Legionella Prevention and Water Safety Program. She's been here at GSA since 2021 and has dedicated her career to public service, ensuring safety and best practices. She currently supports facilities in Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Finally, we also have Richard Best, MS-CSP, with us today. He has more than 20 years of occupational safety and health experience, most recently joining GSA as an industrial hygienist in 2022. He currently supports facilities in the New England states, as well as New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and the Caribbean. Welcome to all of our presenters today. Now that we have met our subject matter experts, I am pleased to turn things over to Courtney, who is going to kick off with today's agenda and give a general overview of what we are going to learn today. So Courtney, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eric. So as you can see from the agenda, I will be providing just a brief set of opening remarks, and then we're going to dive into the results of our baseline testing initiative. We'll talk about changes to GSA's water management policy, changes to our communications and what you can expect to see moving forward. And then moving forward, what our water quality management program will look like in our owned facilities. And lastly, we'll end with some Q&A. So again, we can move to the opening remarks. Next slide, please. Just want to say hello to all of you and sincerely thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to connect with you to talk about what we've learned from baseline testing and what the future holds for GSA's water quality management program. This is the fourth and final puzzle piece that completes our previous client enrichment series sessions on water quality. We know that the quality of the water in our federal buildings and courthouses is a huge priority for you. And as we have been throughout the baseline testing effort, we're committed to full transparency about those findings. Over the last 3 years, you've shared your questions and concerns with us, and through that, you've given us valuable perspective and helped us come a long way in understanding how to better engage with you, the customers in our facilities. Whether it be hosting client enrichment series sessions like this, sharing test results, holding building-specific town halls, or updating our water quality website, we're focused on communicating with you transparently and swiftly. Through our partnerships with federal, state, and local agencies, along with industry experts, GSA has developed some of the most prudent and effective requirements for managing building water and drinking water. Today, we're here to share with you what we've learned from our baseline testing effort and the steps we're taking moving forward. Your safety is our top priority, and that's why we conducted this comprehensive multi-year baseline testing effort across our portfolio of owned buildings and leased spaces. We're leading with data and science. You'll see what our testing revealed and how we're using those insights to make our buildings even safer. Some key points we'll touch on during the session based on feedback we've received from you throughout the last 3 years. We'll start with children. The water in our child care centers will continue to undergo independent annual testing, and we, GSA's Public Building Service, will ensure that child care providers are flushing our water weekly. Legionella. Detecting Legionella in water systems, even those that are well managed, is not unusual due to its naturally occurring presence. It's in the water you drink at your gym, it's in the hotels where you shower and brush your teeth, and it may even be in your home. In fact, research indicates that Legionella can be found in approximately 50% of facilities. While achieving zero Legionella is not feasible due to its natural prevalence, GSA is committed to applying industry-standard water management practices to prevent cases of human disease. What you'll learn today is encouraging to me, and I hope it is to you as well. Our buildings perform better than industry benchmarks, our proactive approach works, and simple operational improvements are really effective. Our baseline testing showed that we're performing better than industry standards, and most importantly, we have 0 confirmed cases of illness linked to drinking water at any of our owned facilities. You'll also see how increased occupancy as we all return to the office actually helps water quality by restoring intended water flow patterns. Our commitment to full transparency throughout this effort was to earn your trust, and our goal here today is to earn your confidence that every GSA building meets the highest safety standards you expect and deserve. And now I'm going to hand things off to one of our talented, hardworking industrial hygienists. Matthew, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk briefly about the results from our baseline testing. Next slide, please. So this was a extensive nationwide effort where we tested 1,074 owned facilities and 4,919 leased facilities. Next slide, please. Now we'll talk about some key takeaways from this baseline testing. We found that 40.1% of the buildings we found Legionella. That's greater than 1 colony forming unit per milliliter. What's important to note is we were expecting closer to 50% based off conversations with the CDC and industry experts. One safety note, no single confirmed case of Legionnaire's disease or related illness associated with drinking water in our facilities. The majority of these exceedances were resolved we were able to resolve with operational adjustments like cleaning aerators, flushing efforts, and adjusting water temperatures. Now that we have higher building occupancy, that we've reestablished increased water usage, and now that reduces the potential for stagnation. And I'm now going to turn it over to one of our other IHs, Patricia, to discuss the changes to our water management policy.
Thank you, Matt. We are now going to discuss what our changes were in our policy. Next slide, please. Our water policy was updated, and it was signed officially March 2nd of 2026, and we now call it our water quality management. Next slide, please. There are some important policy updates and improvements that are important to be noted, highlighted here. It will start with there was a lot of lessons learned for our baseline sampling. We incorporated all of that data analysis for the extensive sampling that was done within GSA to provide process improvements, and took all the feedback we have from our stakeholders, both with our external stakeholders, clients, and within GSA, to further align with industry standards. So we removed GSA generated requirements and greater inclusion of requirements from industry standards and regulatory guidelines, such as ASHRAE and AHA and CDC, who are leading industry experts in that arena. Those experts' feedback was incorporated from water quality experts and other authorities into our policy updates that will go in further. Next slide, please. GSA has a continued approach for Legionella management. We understand it is a key, and it was a concern for many of you guys. So we are instituting proactive water management. We're committed to ensuring the safety of our building water management systems. Our current water management practice go beyond regulatory requirements. We're using guidelines and everything out there that's science-driven to provide a proactive approach for occupant health and safety. We go above regulations. Right now, there is no enforceable maximum contaminant levels for Legionella in drinking water. However, we're taking proactive measures as much as we can. We're ensuring we use performance-based indicators, which are guidelines within CDC, that are important to note water quality performance. However, they're not health-based thresholds. They do not correlate directly with any disease risk. We are also, as an agency, GSA is voluntarily using water management plans. There's no legal requirement for commercial buildings to implement them. However, we have voluntarily adopted industry-leading ASHRAE standards guidelines to ensure occupant health. We are considered a low-risk environment. Risk to healthy individuals in commercial buildings is significantly lowered compared to healthcare facilities. Legionella is common in buildings and poses increased risk only to select high-risk individuals. Next slide, please. There's some key changes that we're going to highlight in the next couple of slides, including signage notifications. We have formalized our signage based on CDC and BA best practices, and notification process will now be consistent. We've also established water temperature set points in hot water systems to minimize Legionella growth. When we do have new installations, there's flushing, disinfection, and testing aligned with the International Plumbing Code. As well as if there's at any time extended closures, there'll be mandatory testing protocols for buildings closed 30+ calendar days. Next slide, please. We have revised action levels, and we'll go in those details in a few slides. But we have adopted the latest regulatory limits and guidelines for water contaminants. Again, it's important to note our proactive approach in water management plans. We're adopting them and executing water management plans for high-risk buildings and the equipment following the ASHRAE standards. Our response actions are updated with contaminant-specific protocols for timely response to water quality exceedances and complaints within our buildings. One thing that I want to stress, just as a reminder, fixtures with Legionella, if they will remain in service according to CDC and VA guidelines and industry expert feedback that we collaborated with throughout our pioneering effort in GSA. So Legionella fixtures, if there is something found, they will remain in service. They will no longer be taken out of service. Next slide, please. Our revised action levels. One of the ones that we want to highlight is our lead action level. It has been lowered, so now we're more stringent. Anything greater than 10 parts per billion. Previously, it was 15 parts per billion, and we did this in order to align with the EPA action level. For copper and total coliform and E. coli, the action levels remain the same to align again with EPA drinking water standards. Copper action levels will stay at 1,300 parts per million or 1.3 milligram per liter, and total coliforms E. coli is any presence of it. For Legionella action levels, it will be results within 1.0 colony forming units per milliliter to 9.9 colony forming units per milliliter, and are considered poorly controlled, and they do require monitoring, but they do not require resampling. Any level of control is still controlled and not uncontrolled, and we'll discuss these further detail here in a little bit. Next slide, please. Our initial response actions will have a flow that is described here. Notification, we're going to notify occupants in accordance with our PBS risk management and notification policy. We're posting signage as appropriate. For alternative water sources, we're going to consider that providing alternative sources of drinking water and or water filters if adequate. Potable water is not readily accessible. We'll be deciding that on case by case on what's going on within the building. We will be having expert involvement by the PBS National Industrial Hygiene Program Manager and other subject matter experts to discuss applicable corrective actions on what's going on and identified in the building. We will also be contacting our municipal water supply to determine if there's any ongoing water distribution issues before it gets to our buildings, as that can be a contributor at times. And last but not least, we'll flash resample impacted outlets as appropriate and when necessary. Next slide, please. As promised, here are the response actions for Legionella. We are considered well controlled anytime we have anything less than 1 colony forming unit per milliliter. At that point, there'll be no action required. If we find that we fall in the category of poorly controlled, the 1.0 colony forming unit per milliliter to 9.9 colony forming units per liter, we will monitor. We'll measure the disinfectant levels, such as chlorine within the building. We'll measure temperatures. We're going to assess maintenance, usage of the building, and flushing. We're in an uncontrolled environment, anything greater than 10 colony forming units per milliliter, we will investigate and mitigate. That will include measuring disinfectant and temperatures, access. We're going to be assessing what the usage is, what flushing is going on, clean the aerators within that area, replace filters as necessary, flush and retest. Next slide, please. Fixtures with Legionella will remain in service. Again, we're just stressing that just because it is a change from where we started. In our policy, we formalized GSA's November 2024 protocol change officially into our policy signed in 2026. We're continuing usage to eliminate water oxidation. We can't stress that enough. Moving that water is very important, and it's where you guys can help us. Using those outlets, getting that moving water as we all return to the office. That is a primary contributor to Legionella growth if the water is not moving. So we can help with that on our day-to-day. It aligns with CSDC and VA guidance for facility management. Risk to the average healthy person is extremely low. However, if individuals are high risk based on something that's going on health-wise, please refer to your healthcare provider for guidance. Normal use of water and drinking is considered safe for most people. Legionella exposure is through aerosolization, not ingestion. And that's the key reminder for all of you. Next slide, please. Now here we're going to touch base a little bit on water management plans. They are for potable water. A water management plan is required in GSA controlled facilities. We identified more than 10 stories, including basement levels, or if the centralized hot water system is across multiple housing units. There are other reasons why we may recommend one, as PBS industrial hygienist, that will include if there is a systemic issue going on, an increased Legionella positivity, or if there's a systemic issue with historical water challenges, such as any other opportunistic pathogens or other drinking water contaminants, such as like the ones we discussed earlier, lead or copper, or overall quality. And furthermore, what is the water management plan? What are we, how are we using and what are we following? We are following ASHRAE standards and CDC guidance. It is building specific. Essentially, it is a roadmap to control and minimize conditions that may contribute to the poor water quality within a building. It includes periodic flushing, chlorine, disinfectant levels, readings, temperatures, and other measurements, as well as routine water testing to ensure that the plan is working. The plan is reviewed and adjusted periodically, such as when there's changing, construction, renovation, or if there's ever a time when a portion of the building is not in use or not operational. Next slide, please. The water management plans also include items for specific equipment. There are specific plans for the equipment for Legionella controls required for all facilities, regardless of the size, equipped with if they have a cooling tower, if they have decorated fountains, centralized installed misters, atomizers, or air washers, or non-steam humidifiers. They do include testing and validation requirements. Baseline requirement for validation through culturable Legionella testing. Cooling tower equipment requires the routine testing as well while the cooling towers are in operation. Most are already integrated to our operations and maintenance specifications. Next slide, please. Now we'll turn it over to communications and to my colleague, Richard Best.
Thank you, Patricia. Next slide, please. GSA has made updates to our water quality communications as part of all of this. We have revised our signage to reflect the level of risk, as well as CDC and industry guidance and best practices. Out-of-service signage will continue to be used for fixtures with suspected lead, copper, or coliform exceedances. This signage will be posted in common areas and over specific fixtures during testing. We have updated our notification policy. Direct alerts will be sent to affected occupants in specific areas of a facility with a drinking water exceedance. Building-wide notifications will be sent when systemic issues are identified in a facility. These communications have been standardized to align with our updated policy and ensure consistent messaging to our tenants. Next slide. All right, moving forward, GSA will continue to complete the resolution of exceedances that were identified during the baseline water sampling project. GSA will establish water management plans at select buildings, which is any building 10 stories or greater, and any building identified via baseline water sampling as having systemic water challenges. Developing and implementing the water management plans is expected to take approximately 1 year. As part of our new policy, we also have quality control measures in place. These include set hot water temperature points, routine sampling of cooling towers and condensers, revised guidelines for flushing, disinfection, and testing of new water infrastructure, equipment-specific management plans, guidance for sampling that is required after extended building closures, and define routine sampling for buildings on private wells. Next slide. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Courtney Hatchell for our question and answers.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Richard, and thank you to the IHs for your presentation. I'm digging into the Q&A pod here, And I will start going through them, and we'll do our best to answer what we can here. So the first question that came in states, I understand water management plans are required for GSA controlled facilities. What about GSA lease space and facilities? So with GSA owned facilities that meet the applicability requirements, those are going to have those ASHRAE 188 water management plans. This is a voluntary initiative on the part of GSA. There are no regulatory requirements that we put these plans in place. That's why we keep referring to this being an above standard approach. Lessors are still required to provide drinking water that complies with applicable regulatory requirements, but we cannot impose on them this requirement that they instill these water management plans or conduct additional testing. The next question states, going from PBS 100.7A to 1000.7B, it seemed like water quality testing requirements were scaled back from all properties over 1,000 square feet to only those that had concerning results from the baseline testing or other risk factors. If I have this correct, I was hoping you could talk about the decision not to require ongoing surveillance for all or most facilities. And I think, Jennifer, were you going to answer that?
Sure, I can dive into that one. So the requirement for the 10 stories or higher is based on discussions with CDC and the VA, and these are considered high-risk facilities. And so that's why we targeted those. We were requiring those to have an ASHRAE 188 water management plan. But that doesn't exclude other facilities of any size from having one, developed. If your facility has a history of water quality issues, if there's a lot of sediment in your water, or you're getting a lot of lead or copper hits or even iron, we can put a water quality management plan in place on the recommendation from the IH after we do some more testing, kind of figure out what's going on. So it's not exclusionary. We're not saying we won't. It's just saying these are the ones where we are absolutely requiring it because they are considered high risk at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. The next question is, are potable water issues a landlord responsibility, or do tenants need to submit an RWA for assistance? Lessors are required to provide drinking water that meets the regulatory definition of potable water, and that's defined by OSHA and EPA. But if the issue is related to that, then the lessor would be responsible for remediating that issue. Let's see. The next question is, where can I find the information on the Legionella guidelines stating it is non-harmful or does not correlate directly with any disease risk? I have multiple individuals at an LPOE, that's a land port of entry for those who don't know, that are very concerned regarding Legionella and are not wanting to drink the water. I'll open that up to our IH community for an answer. Anybody want to take that one on?
I mean, really your best sources are go to the CDC website, and they have a lot of information about Legionella and potable water and how to manage it. And there's several discussions there about Legionella being, safe. It's more of a water management thing than health risk or health related issue. So I would, definitely say CDC is a very good source. I think the VA has a little bit too. We would have to dive into that a little bit better and get you some specific links on that if you need that to discuss with your agency. But definitely that's a good starting place.
Thank you, Jennifer. Next question is, will water management plans be implemented automatically in buildings that meet the requirements, or will that be left up to local GSA staff to decide? I can take that one. For the buildings that meet the ASHRAE requirement standard, which is 10 stories and above, that will be implemented in those facilities. We're going to be working with our acquisition community and the local building staff, as well as our O&M contractors, to bring in specialized vendors at those 200 some locations to develop and implement those plans. So that is happening at a minimum. Where there is some discretion is if it doesn't meet the 10-story requirement, but there were issues uncovered from baseline testing. Perhaps it's not a 10-story building, but it's 1 million square feet. That's obviously a complex plumbing system. And that discretion is a conversation between the building management staff and our industrial industrial hygienists, who are the subject matter experts here. And there are already a number of buildings that throughout the baseline testing initiative, we determined that an ASHRAE 188 management plan was an appropriate corrective action, and we've already gone about putting that in place. And it might not have been a building that was 10 stories or more. Another question is, how often does GSA test the water? So what we've done over the last 3 years is what we just called the baseline testing initiative. And it's not a requirement. There's no requirement that we be testing our water regularly for any of those parameters. But we wanted to get an idea of where we stood in these facilities. What are we seeing, following that? And then what sort of corrections do we need to put in place immediately? And what sorts of long-term corrections should we be putting in place? I'll just say anecdotally, one of the big things we saw was the hot water temperatures. And you heard us talk about that earlier. That's an update to the order. Keeping that temperature at 140 degrees, we noticed, was a really critical corrective action that helped us when we uncovered Legionella in certain locations. So the test result came in, we saw Legionella show up, we raised those water temperatures, retested, issue resolved. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, very simple operational and mechanical adjustments were able to be made throughout the effort that we will continue into the future. As far as continued testing, buildings that are getting these ASHRAE 188 water management plans will be required to do periodic sampling at least once annually. So if you have an ASHRAE 188 plan, you're going to validate that plan is working by doing one test every year at a minimum. A lot of the plans that I've been seeing as they're being put in place are actually looking more at like twice annually or even quarterly that testing is happening. And that's just of the potable water. One of the, I guess, bigger concerns around water quality and safety comes from this equipment that can aerosolize water. So we're thinking cooling towers, decorative fountains, misters, etc. Any building, whether it meets that is applicable to those ASHRAE standards, any building that has any of that equipment will have to test the water in that equipment at least twice while it's in operation. So if you have a cooling tower at your building that's maybe not over 10 stories, the water in that cooling tower, if it's running from April to October, is going to be tested at least twice to ensure Legionella levels are safe. Let's see, go into some more questions here. Oh, we got quite a few more come in. I think, can you go over the cyclic testing policy for GSA leased facilities? How often, cost to tenant, coordination POCs, potential for focus testing based on a customer concern? Thanks. So again, there is no requirement that we can hold a lessor to have to do any sort of regular recurring testing. If an issue arises, it is the lessor's responsibility to provide potable water per industry regulations, and we can work with them to ensure that occurs. So there's no regular cadence. It's more when something comes up that we suspect the terms of that contract, which state that the water must be potable, are not occurring, then we can work with them to get that testing done. This is one that I might need the IH community support on. What about testing for arsenic in the Southwest, given the prevalence in the local water supplies?
I can help.
And if that's one, oh, go ahead. Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, so part of that, I'm situated in Texas and New Mexico, so I am familiar with arsenic in the drinking water supplies, especially at some of our LPOEs. So we do review the Consumer Confidence Report for drinking water annually. That's one of our requirements. We review it with the O&M, and we're looking for any notice of violations in the NOVs, and in particular arsenic. So if we are, the city is reporting to us that we are getting hits of arsenic in the drinking water, then we will pursue testing arsenic at our facilities to ensure that they're at a safe level. Sorry, I've got to. Let me stand up. Sorry. Apologize for that. So yes, we are aware of it. We are reviewing it very closely, and we're monitoring that, especially in our Southwest facilities. And in some of them, we have installed some reverse osmosis and some other things to remediate the arsenic that was coming from the cities. And we're working with the cities and having conversations with them as well to see what they're doing to ensure the drinking water is safe coming into our facilities.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. The next question I can address, but any of you IHs want to jump in, please do. Can you also talk about why the trigger for having a water management plan is the height of the building? What is the guidance for large facilities or large campuses that have a significant footprint, but not the vertical height? I didn't think Legionella or other water quality issues cared only about number of stories. So specific to the ASHRAE standard, that is where we pulled that that 10-story requirement. So if you go to the CDC's website, you can see there's a checklist for whether or not your building should have an ASHRAE 188 plan. Some of those questions are you a healthcare facility? We don't have any health, none of our building inventory is a healthcare facility. Do you house people overnight? We don't have that going on with our buildings. The one that applies to us is the building 10 stories or greater? So that standard was developed by a panel of experts years and years ago, one of which was Dr. Janet Stout, who's participated in past client enrichment series sessions. And you can see a presentation that she did for us about Legionella on our website. Highly encourage you check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But I don't know if I can speak directly to why 10 stories is what they brought up. Maybe one of the IHs can contribute to that. But you did mention large facilities or large campuses. That's what I was getting at before. We are well aware of buildings where it might not be a 10-story building, but if you turned it on its side, it would be 10 stories. That equates to a complex plumbing system. We're going to be working with our building managers to identify those locations, and we'll likely be putting water management plans in place there as well. So really what we said at that 10 stories, that's just the minimum. And then we're going to be going through and determining other locations that we want to put those in. Anybody have anything to add to the 10-story requirement? Is it just about the height of the plumbing system?
I'll take this one, Courtney.
Thanks, Rob.
Hold on a second.
It's like you're still muted. Oh,
sorry about that. I'm sharing a room, so getting echo. Bottom line is it's a bright line they came up with is bigger the building, more complicated the plumbing system, the more likely there is going to be having infrastructure that could be problematic for Legionella. A lot of hot water storage tanks, long runs of distal legs, plumbing risers. So there's no hard and fast rule why they did say 10's the cutoff. It's a nice round number that ASHRAE decided on, that committee decided on, that bigger than this is a complicated system that's going to require a higher level of control. But like as you indicated, even a single story building that has a large footprint has a complicated plumbing system, and we'll consider that as we evaluate whether or not it needs a water management plan.
Thank you, Rob. Next question is how or who do we talk to about buildings that have systemic water challenges? Who will decide if those buildings will have a water management plan funded. Great place to start is with your building manager. From there, that will be escalated to the team of industrial hygienists within our programs and services department. But that's your entree into that into our expertise is talking to your building manager. I will say, through the baseline testing effort, we've got a pretty solid awareness of any of those buildings that have had systemic or historic water challenges. So it was just a really great comprehensive look into each specific location's water history and current water quality. The next question, I'm going to need the IHs here. Are the installation of water filtering systems, oh, it just moved on me. Water filtering systems to include reverse osmosis recommended?
I can partially take that, and anyone
Okay.
else feel free to jump in. Reverse osmosis is going to be a very much case to case, building by building, depending on what contaminant we're dealing with. Reverse osmosis is for very ultra fine contaminants that would be, bacteria, Legionella, or anything super ultra fine particulate coming in from the city side. So it's not going to be a blanket. No, not across the board. We're not doing reverse osmosis, because even then itself, it can create its own set of problems by filtering out too much, and the drinking water taste gets a little skewed, and we're then allowing the bacteria to come through and breed a little more. So it really needs to be done on a case of the building.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Okay, next question. Is there a GSA website or fact sheet that we can provide to individual employees to learn more? Signage in buildings by itself has caused alarm to those at higher risk from Legionella. It would be helpful if they had something to share with a physician to determine if they should be in the building or not. We do have a website. I think it's www.waterquality@gsa.gov. I repeated that so many times over the last 3 years, I'm kind of upset with myself for not knowing it off the top of my head, but we can provide that, certainly. There's a ton of great information. We've got a lot of FAQs, I think over 40 FAQs. There's a 10-minute video that the industry experts, Dr. Janet Stout and Dr. Abe Cullum, provided to us. Lots of references to the CDC's website, the various industry consultants that we worked with, in coming up with our new plan. I also highly recommend you to go to the CDC's website. They do have a lot of information about personal health. So if you are immunocompromised or fall into those risk categories, it walks you through the sorts of things that you should be aware of when interacting with water in any facility that you might go to. So there's that one.
Hey, Courtney, it's Eric. Yeah. It's www.gsa.gov/water quality. We'll get you there. We'll put a link to that in the chat.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Go to another question. Okay. Can you clarify the new order requirements for ongoing monitoring? It seemed like most facilities would not be required to do ongoing sampling for a range of water quality parameters, such as pH, temperature, etc., or endpoints like lead, coliforms, etc. I would think large facilities should be doing regular monitoring. How would we know the response actions are triggered if we don't sample on a routine basis? So to your point, large facilities, which are really going to be those that meet that 10-story or taller criteria, or those that we talked about, 1 story but 1 million square feet, or had water quality issues, we're going to be putting those plans in place that will require continuous monitoring and validation. We do other types of routine testing, such as residual chlorine. So that's the chlorine coming in from the public water supply, making that it's at sufficient levels to detectable, I should say, throughout the facility. That's the first line of defense against the growth of bacteria. So there will be testing that happens, but we're not going to be doing the baseline testing on any sort of a recurring basis. I hope that does answer your question. And if any of the IHs or anyone else in the risk management division wants to add anything to my answer, please do. Let's see.
Maybe make a quick distinction here, Courtney.
Sure.
So we sometimes do a lot of things that we call more monitoring, things that we can measure on the spot using handheld meters, things like chlorine, things like temperature, things like pH. So a lot of that doesn't really fall into sampling where we actually collect a physical sample of that water and then send it off to a laboratory. So that's, from an industrial hygiene perspective, that's usually what we think of as sampling. But we do routine measurements on our water systems routinely, and we'll continue to do so. And that is one of the more fundamental portions of a water quality management plan, is having these control points that you measure. But even buildings that don't have a water management plan, especially if we troubleshoot a concern complaint condition, we will be doing measurements to ascertain, are there factors or conditions or other things going on in that building that could cause issues. So yes, sampling will be limited to those facilities that to validate water management plans. We will continue to always have our stance to investigate a particular complaint, concern, or condition as they arise, which may mean measurement, may also mean taking samples and taking those samples to the lab to validate them. But measurement will continue to be an important tool in our toolbox for all facilities, whether or not that facility gets routine sampling where we actually collect a physical sample of that water and submit it to the lab.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rob. Next question. Will there be any specific requirements for childcare centers? Yes, we will still test the water in our childcare centers annually. The big concern with childcare centers and children in general are those metals that we did with the baseline testing. So annually we do test those fixtures in our fixtures that are fit for consumption for those sorts of parameters. In addition, it is now a requirement for all of our childcare providers to flush all point of use outlets within their space on a weekly basis. So once a week, I think we encourage them to do it on Mondays. They have to go through and perform a flushing per guidance that we provided them, and we've given them a log, and we check, our lease administration managers, the IHs and so forth are checking periodically to ensure that that's happening. Anything to add to that team on childcare centers? Okay. This is an interesting one. What assistance is available to federal facilities that are not owned by GSA regarding managing and monitoring water quality? I'll just say, reach out to us and we would love to have a conversation with you. This team has learned so much over the last 3 years. I think there was already a breadth of knowledge, but the baseline testing has really opened our eyes to a lot of things. So we would love to have a conversation with you and we can walk you through the steps that we took and provide any help that you need. So if you need our contact information, just please feel free to reach directly out. We had a question come in about PFAS, and I'm going to go up to that 1 second. I know that that's on people's minds. Can you tell us if any PFAS testing has been accomplished specifically in the National Capital Region? Can someone take that? Rob, are you going to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So we will circle back with our colleagues who support NCR to confirm, but to the best of my knowledge, GSA has not conducted PFAS sampling specific to drinking water systems that we own or operate. EPA and states did require that those drinking water systems, so the municipal supplies, were required to do PFAS testing, and those results are reported. And I think Jennifer talked about this earlier, with the annual report of the water quality that all regulated drinking water systems are required to put out to their communities, the consumer confidence report. So you can go to your specific, municipalities, drinking water website. They usually will have the links to those annual water quality reports, and in there we'll have the results of a wide variety of different types of sampling that they've done, including any of these PFAS sampling that they are now required to do in accordance with EPA and state environmental regulations.
Great, thank you, Rob. Next question. If we want to offer filtered water systems like Culligan or Aramark vendors, for instance, does GSA have a preferred vendor? That is interesting. When we were providing bottled water when needed, that was handled very much at the local level with the building managers. I don't know that we have a preferred vendor, but I don't know. I see some shaking heads. So not that I'm aware of. I do know that we have used the Culligan bottled water. But yeah, I wouldn't say that we have a preferred vendor. Sorry about that. So next question, if there are outstanding issues identified during baseline sampling efforts, for example, lead, copper exceedances, total coliform results, Legionella identified, will GSA continue to work to resolve those? Yes, absolutely. Our baseline testing corrective action checklist requires us to continue to, if we get results that showed exceedances of our thresholds, we implemented corrective actions specific to whatever that was, whether it was lead, copper, Legionella. And then we were required to retest until those exceedances were resolved. And so, once we get to what we consider the all clear, which is a little bit of a misnomer, but the all clear, then that's when we consider the baseline test resolved. Let's see. The question came in, what are the requirements for facilities that are delegated? That's a great question. We will be updating our SOP for delegated facilities and including, it will incorporate the water quality management order that we're briefing on, the revisions to that, as well as the associated desk guide. And those will be expected to be implemented in our delegated facilities as well. Let's see. I think we've covered all of the questions. And again, and Eric, help me out here. If there was something that we did not specifically answer, we do circle back and provide that. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So if any questions that we didn't get to during the course now or while we are doing our wrap up, if people have questions they submit, we will get those to our subject matter experts and get those questions answered, and those will go up on our website.
Great, thanks, Eric. And then a question did come in. Can you provide the contact information for the water quality team? We do still have an inbox. Is that correct, team? What is that again? From the didn't we have one for incoming questions?
There's an email. Give me 1 second and I can find it.
And
I think it's waterquality@gsa.gov.
Waterquality@gsa.gov. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we add the website and the email address to that Q&A document when we turn that around.
Great. Okay, I think we should be good.
All right. Well, thank you very much again to all of our customers out there. We are just going to do some wrap up. But if you have any questions or any last minute thoughts, certainly put them into the Q&A pod while I am talking here. I want to first, again, thank all of our customers for attending, particularly those who have been to 2, 3, and now 4 of these over the years. Big thanks to our industrial hygienists and our subject matter experts for not just the presentation, but this was obviously a very live Q&A heavy session. So we appreciate you guys thinking on the spot. A separate special shout out to Courtney, who's been doing this and living this since 2023. Think about that journey, everything that's happened between then and now. So as I mentioned, we are going to provide a recording of this session and a formal Q&A document up on our website, www.gsa.gov/CES, when we have those materials available. And I want to draw your attention on the screen here. We have another client enrichment series scheduled for July, where there's a will, there's a way to better workspaces. And that will, WIL, is the Workplace Innovation Lab. Speaking of things that have been around since 2023, we are going to be giving an overview of the different iterations of our Workplace Innovation Lab at GSA headquarters, where we have had a proving ground for technology, for furniture, to make better use of space, more efficient spaces. The will be sunsetting in the very near future, so we are going to provide lessons learned, best practices, and tangible steps that your agencies can take based on what we have learned over the past couple of years. We will have a registration link live very soon, and probably coming out with the post-session email that all of you registrants will receive in the next day or two. So one more time, I want to thank all of our customers for attending, the great facilities management team, as well as everybody in the client enrichment series, working very hard behind the scenes. You can always stay up on all of our content online, www.gsa.gov/CES. And just as a reminder, the goal of the Client Enrichment Series is to engage our audience in workplace topics that contribute to your mission success and to the effective management of your real estate and workplace programs. One more time from all of us here at GSA PBS, thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.